2019. Please note this meeting may be recorded and subsequently made available for the public for listening purposes. So without further ado, we'll just press on, and we've got SEDERUNT and apologies, please. Lucy.
Good morning, everyone. We have 14 members present. We are quorate, and so far I have received apologies from Councillor McKee and Councillor Wood. Councillor.
Sorry, David Ingalls, Councillor David Ingalls, apologies, and Councillor Goosty is running late, but will be attending.
Okay, I'll note that. And Councillor McClelland is not present, but maybe along later in the meeting.
Thank you. So if we then go on to number 2, declarations of interest, are there any for any of the members? No, thank you. So then item 3 is minute of the previous meeting of 23rd of April. Are we happy to approve the minutes as they are? Councillor Murray?
I had thought Councillor Scobie was present, but he's not on the list.
I appreciate, Councillor Scobie, you're a welcome permanent fixture at this committee, but I think you did attend the last meeting, is that correct? So, and you're, yeah, well, I thought you did as well. So, is that something we can have corrected? So,
yeah, I'll get that noted.
Thank you. With that amendment, then, are we happy to approve the minute? Yep, agreed. Thank you. So next up, item 4 is duty of candour, and this is a report to provide an updated position on the implementation of the duty of candour provisions, which are set out in the Health, Tobacco, Nicotine, etc. and Care Scotland Act 2016. Now, Lillian, are you going to speak to this one? Oh, sorry, Heather, if you'd like to introduce this to members. Is there anything you'd like to add to the report?
Yes, please. Just to say that following the consultation on the paper, we're proposing to add in at 8.12 in the policy the need for us, where appropriate, to consult with legal services. We'd overlooked that initially, so we'll amend the policy just to reflect that as and when we need to do that. I think other than that, just to give you the detail under 3.4, under 3.3, where we talk about the range of activity that we've got planned. That's planned for July and August, so that's well underway and about to start, just so that you're aware of the timescale on that. And other than that, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Heather. Members, do you have any questions on the report in front of us? Councillor Crothers? Ian?
Thank you, Chair. It's not so much on the report in front of us, it's obviously it's fairly new. It's across the whole partnership. I just wonder, was there any particular examples? Talks about an annual report. We'll see that at some point. Just the process, procedures. When will we see that? What will that look like? I would imagine it'll just be an analysis of what's happened. But it is new, and it's quite I think a strong item when it comes to it. Is there, if there's nothing in Dumfries and Galloway, any further afield where there's been any incidents or so on and so forth?
Yeah, I'll hand over to Lillian initially. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Crowers. We don't anticipate that the numbers that may fall under this new legislation will be significant. Clearly, we have many other processes that sit below. These are for the most extreme incidents, and today I'm not aware nationally of any, particularly for social work, that have been dealt under this duty. Our colleagues in the NHS have other significant events that may come under this duty, and they would deal with those from a clinical setting. But to date, there's not very many numbers at all. I'm not aware of any.
So I suppose just the annual report as well. I just wondered, when I seen that was mentioned, I just wondered what the timelines on that are.
What our plan would be that we would produce an annual report a year into the new legislation, so that would be April, May 2020, and we will do a benchmark across our other local authorities.
Councillor Diggy Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Heather, at 3.2 there's reference to the duty of candour procedure not being activated for near misses. I was just wondering if there is a near miss, is that captured in any way, and so that any lessons that can be learned are are learned? 'Cause I'm thinking of, health and safety legislation that you would report a near miss.
Yeah, there are a couple of things. I suppose firstly is that it's quite specific criteria here that you have to meet to enter into this legislation. But a couple of the processes we'd look to would be certainly our complaints process as to anything that come up through that. Certainly in terms of our health and safety reporting, where there are processes in place around reporting near misses and actual incidents, which would always then be investigated. But also in terms of our practice, you'd be looking to our initial case review and significant case review process, which is where we would always look to say, how did something happen, particularly when it's a near miss of something that we think we maybe could have done better, or that something else could have happened. That's the process we would look in terms of actual outcomes and impact on people. So yes, I think as Lillian has said, this sort of complements sort of existing processes rather than sort of sitting on its own.
Councillor Scobie.
I know Lillian's just said we don't expect to see many coming through. Well, I'm just dealing with one just now. But it's really, 3.1, duty of conduct is legal requirement for healthcare service and social work organisations to inform people and their families when they have been harmed, either physically or psychologically. And it's really to ask, what the scope is and whether, the person's own circumstances is taken into consideration in what they may be going through, whether they be addicted or whatever to any substance misuse, whether, we do pick up these cases and we do deal with them under the duty of conduct and provide them with the services that they require. And I'll maybe pick up the individual case with Heather out with this.
Okay, thank you. I'll hand over to Lillian first, who'll give an introduction to the answer.
Councillor Scobie, I'm not aware of any case that currently is under duty of candour for social work services, so we would need to pick that up off table. I'm not aware of that at all, and I would ask Heather to come in with the second part of your question.
In terms of how we would talk to families, we would obviously want to take account of individual situations. However, that wouldn't get in the way of where this meets the criteria, where we have a duty to explain what happened, that we would go ahead and do that. We may then give some considerations to how best that could be done. We'd also be looking at, in terms of legal representation around whether or not somebody had a power of attorney, whether there was a guardian involved, to make sure that the appropriate people within a family were being involved. So, it's like everything else that we would do, we would look at it in terms of making sure that we were sort of approaching it in the right way, taking account of the individual circumstances, but within the context that it has to meet the criteria for the duty of candour.
I'm happy to provide Lillian with the detail on the case, and it's really the scope as to what we can offer that individual or family in terms of what their needs are at the time.
I suppose, Councillor Scobie, it's just very clear the policy that it would be my decision to invoke the duty of candour, and nothing has come across me, so I'll happily have that conversation. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ian Carruthers.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the back of the points that are being raised there, so I think it's easy. I find it quite easy from thinking of the partnership rather than social work, that in health it'd be quite easy to think of a scenario where it may happen, on the operating tables, for example. But social work, I always find it a wee bit more difficult. So just taking consideration some of the questions being asked there, is there a scenario or an example that you can't really give us an example because it's not happened, but a scenario just so got a better understanding, Chair?
I mean, certainly, I suppose a fairly simple example would be along if something, as a consequence of an action of a member of our staff in one of our children's houses, caused direct harm to a young person or their family. But clearly, as I've indicated, we haven't had an incident yet, and the indication nationally is that these numbers will be very small. So that would be an example if a member of our staff undertook something, for example, took a child bungee jumping and something happened. That would be absolutely a responsibility and under this legislation. That sounds extreme, but that's a kind of example that I think might clarify the level of risk that we would need to reach.
Councillor Murray.
I assume it doesn't apply, does it, if, as a result of no action being taken by a member of staff, a person is harmed. So, for example, if somebody's assessment is incorrect or the treatment is incorrect, or not done, and the person then becomes harmed as a result, would it actually apply in those cases?
That would apply in those cases if it were extreme, yes.
Okay. Are we happy then having answers to those questions and taking on board Heather's 3.12 where we consult with legal services amendment? Are we happy to note the progress on the implementation of duty of candour as set out in section 3.3? Yep. Okay, thank you.
Drag this out as long as possible.
Page 23.
Yeah, just come
Might be the quicker way to do it.
Right, just building up a sense of anticipation there, but we're on to now item 5, which is Audit Scotland Working Group Update. And we're being asked to note and discuss the draft self-assessment. Now, we've got Julie White here to speak to this. So is there anything you want to add to this before we open it to members?
No, I don't think so, Chair. I would just like to highlight that this self-assessment has been undertaken by the IGB and the Health and Social Care Partnership, but in partnership with the Health Board and the local authority. Just want to highlight to members that we did have a workshop in April with Audit Scotland. They came down to Dumfries and Galloway to discuss their report that they'd undertaken nationally, and we invited elected members to that workshop. So what you have in front of you is our self-assessment that's been undertaken within the partnership in relation to the 6 key themes that are within the Audit Scotland report. And the next stage in this process is for us as a health and social care partnership to develop an action plan to take forward the actions that we identified within the self-assessment. The first meeting of that group had taken place in the last week. So it was just to update members on that, and we can bring back more detail on the action plan to a future committee, Chair, if members would like to see that.
Okay, I'm sure members would welcome that. Julie, thank you. But is there any questions on the report itself? Councillor Murray.
Can I ask a question about page 45, which actually has been assessed as being exemplary, but you're also saying set-aside budgets are not a feature of the Dumfries and Galloway integration scheme. Can you explain what a set-aside budget is?
Yeah, sure. So in most other partnerships, Councillor Murray, the totality of acute services isn't delegated. So most other health boards only delegate the part of their budget which is associated with emergency care, unscheduled services. So that's known as a set-aside budget for the IGB to commission services from. The reason we don't have a set-aside budget is because the Health Board has delegated the totality of acute services, so everything's in the IGB, and that's why it's assessed as being exemplary. There are a lot of challenges elsewhere in the country around the debates around the use of set-aside budgets. What we've got in our partnership is the ability for our members of the IGB to have complete transparency in the use of resource right across health and social care because we've delegated the totality of acute services, hence that assessment within the self-assessment.
Thanks, that certainly clarifies it. Can I also ask about the reserves? I know I quite often go on about the reserves, but you say that the board has a reserve policy set out within its financial regulations, and your reserves are money which is committed but not yet spent, rather than general reserves as held by the council.
That's right, Councillor Murray. So within the IGB, and I think it is something that as we are evolving as an IGB, I think we need to be really thoughtful about the language that we're using because of the interpretation of the word reserves. I mean, the reserves that we have within the IGB budget are related to specific pots of funding that we have received from Scottish Government that is committed to undertake specific pieces of work but hasn't been fully utilised. So if I use the example of part of that reserves is in relation to a fund called the Primary Care Improvement Fund. And that was funding that each partnership got in relation to the implementation of the new GP contract. And we've been receiving reports at the IJB every second meeting around the implementation of that contract. But because the implementation requires us to recruit significant numbers of additional staff, it's taken time to recruit those staff and they're not all in post. So that pot of money, we hold it as a reserve so that we can still, so it's committed, but it's a time frame for us to recruit staff into post. So they are all, so there's the Primary Care Improvement Fund, there's the Mental Health Strategy Fund, there's the Integrated Care Fund, and the Social Care Fund, and those are the key sort of pots of resource that make up the reserves. But I would highlight again to committee, these are reserves that are for a dedicated purpose, and they have got, they are allocated. They haven't yet been fully spent though for a number of reasons within the partnership.
The council is, I was strongly advised by Audit Scotland to hold 2% in general unallocated reserves. Is that true of the health board as well? Is it in the same situation?
No, it's not. Not in terms of the health board has a different approach again to reserves. But certainly for us as an IJB, we're clear that we don't have a pot of general reserves. The reserves that we are holding are for those ring fence purposes.
Thank you, Julie, for that. Councillor Karen Carruthers.
Thanks, Chair. It's just on page 28 in regards to collaborative leadership and building relationships. It's got a paragraph that says the Health and Social Care Partnership has continued to work towards developing a positive workplace culture by focusing on leadership and good communication and conversation skills. Managers and leaders have been supported to develop towards the agreed ideal culture based on constructive behaviour such as taking responsibility, developing others, working cooperatively and pursuing excellence. How is this going to be measured, the kind of outcome on staff at the coalface, if you like? How's that being fed down? How's that going to be fed back up? And what's the outcome you're kind of looking for?
So there's a number of things that we're undertaking. I mean, I think within the partnership, one of the kind of key programmes that we're introducing now across the partnership is a programme called the Working Well programme for staff. And that's around promoting staff's well-being whilst they're at work, and encouraging people to maintain good levels of physical activity and improving their own mental health at work. So we've introduced things like Tai Chi classes at lunchtime and things like that. The way in which we'll measure it, a number of things. We undertake a staff survey across the partnership. So there would be an expectation that feedback in the staff survey would be that staff are feeling supported at work, that they're feeling that their development needs are being met, and we would look for improvements in terms of the outcome of that. We also, within the partnership, undertake something called I Matter, which is a team development programme, and it's about teams are asked to reflect on how they work together as a team and what improvements they can make and develop their own action plans. So we look at the number of teams that have developed an action plan, and then we look at how those action plans are being implemented. So we would measure it in that way as well. And ultimately, we would be looking at obviously sort of sickness rates as well and absence rates within the partnership, with an expectation that ultimately we would have a positive impact in terms of the sort of absence rates of staff who work within the partnership in health and social care.
Do you want to come back, Karen?
Thank you. So how are you going to make sure that all teams are going to be supported and given the best opportunity? Because there's some workplaces that, because of the nature of the job, they might not be able to do that in a lunch hour because it's not a set aside lunch hour. So how is the fairness across the board?
That's something that we are talking to the teams and the team managers about, because what we've identified is at the moment around 60% of the teams have undertaken the sort of I Matter, and obviously within the partnership we've got a whole range of clinical teams, support teams, professional teams who do some find it more difficult than others. So we've got our organisational development team working with team leaders and managers to think about how we can best support teams, and the answer will be different for different teams depending on their own circumstances. But the way in which we'll monitor it will be about the completion of those iMatter action plans and the delivery of those. So we'll be speaking to managers in areas where there's a low completion rate to understand how can we best support them to undertake those action plans.
I'm going to bring Lillian in just briefly, but obviously those who attended the P&R committee recently would have seen that adult services is one where absence rates are a factor in terms of our staff. But I think Lillian's got something to add to that, because there has been a sort of slight short-term improvement, although the figures are still quite high.
Sorry, it's just to advise members that we are aware that there's a challenge within the adult services in terms of the absence, and we have set some different processes and procedures in place to try and tackle some of those challenges, and that's a joint piece of work along with the General Manager of the Health and Social Care Partnership. So it's just to give assurance to members that we are aware and we are working through some of the challenges within the delegated service for adults.
Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. My point was very largely covered, actually. It's about the fact that we don't, as I understand it, hold any sort of injunction by Audit Scotland to hold a particular amount of reserves, unlike the council. And that's, I think, been the confusion up till now, that it's not held like that. What I was going to say is go on from the question that Karen was asking, which is about teams and getting people to work, because what we're interested in here is the actual integration, the process of integration. And so I suppose that really, Julia, I'm asking through you, Chairman, are we really focusing on the teams which support integration, and how are we measuring their team working, if you see what I mean? Very specific. So the localities work as a one team process, thinking about the finance people working as a one team for integration, internal audit, thinking about it, dare I say it, IT. I'd be really interested to see how the IT team worked together and could demonstrate that they were helping integration. All these things I'd like to poke away at.
I think just to give you reassurance, Councillor Maitland, that absolutely all of those teams that you've highlighted will be part of the work that we do through the partnership. Now, so particularly, as you say, if we go back to what integration is all about, then absolutely key to this is about how well are we truly integrating our teams at that operational level within the localities. So we will be looking at the outputs of the iMatter sort of surveys and action plans within the localities. I think what you've highlighted as well, in the Audit Scotland, you'll see within the report, we have talked about the need for us to review the kind of corporate support that the IJB receives from both parties, so from the local authority and from the NHS, because for things like IT and audit, etc., those are functions that are provided by the two parties. So we are going to do a piece of work over the next 6 months or so, evaluating what level of corporate support we think we need within the IJB, what we're currently receiving and how we can improve on that. And I would just say in relation to the IT, we have made some progress over the last week or two in relation to the work that we've been doing around data sharing arrangements. And I would be hoping to bring an update to the IJB's Audit and Risk Committee in relation to that specific piece of work.
We now have Councillor Sloan.
Thanks very much, Chair. I was pleased to hear Julie talk about the action plans that are shortly to come forward. I think for too long now we've been looking at, what the problems are, and we all know what the problems are. We know we don't have care beds, we don't have care at home properly. We need these things addressed, and I'll be glad when they finally do come forward. But I'm hearing that recently we've lost a locality manager in the west of the region to be temporarily replaced by other managers filling in the gap. That itself has got to weaken a service. because it is extra workload for those other particular managers involved.
I'm afraid I would disagree with that, Councillor Sloan, in terms of that it would weaken the service. What we've been absolutely clear about is that we've put some senior manager support in to cover both Suretree and Wigtonshire, but what we've done is worked with that manager to make sure that she has additional support to undertake some of her duties that she would have been undertaking to free her up. So it's not about us adding significant amounts of additional pressure, and I'm absolutely confident that that individual will have the capacity to undertake the work of the locality manager across those both localities in the interim until we make some permanent arrangements.
I'll be watching that space, Julie.
Okay, thank you, members. Firstly, we've got Councillor Tiggy Campbell, and then I'll take Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. Julie, page 31, 1.3, Audit Scotland have said that the relationship with third and independent sectors must improve, and the self-assessment for this is tick this off as partly established. I'm just wondering what needs to happen for that relationship to improve, because I see there's reference in the following page to partnership working at strategic, tactical and operational levels. Are the third sector, are they committed to this? Is there something culturally that needs to change to enable that?
I think absolutely the third sector are committed to it, Councillor Campbell. I think the challenge has been, because of the third sector being such a diverse range of third sector organisations, I think there's over 2,000 third sector organisations across Dumfries and Galloway. And what that does is it means it's very, very difficult for us to know where to engage. So that's why the report says about us needing to do that work at operational. So the operational level within the localities is understanding what those relationships need to be with third sector providers within the localities, and making sure that the third sector are genuinely represented around the likes of locality management team tables. But it's how you agree what that representation looks like is a challenge when you're working with a multitude of third sector organisations. We also, at that very strategic level, have got third sector interface sit round the IJB, so they're an advisory member of the IJB and are absolutely fully engaged and supportive of the work of the IJB. But I think, again, it's about perhaps at the tactical levels, the kind of senior management level, when we're having the kind of management team discussions, how we best engage with the third sector, and some of that it's not going to be about having an individual sitting at the table, again, because of the multitude of organisations that are important in the partnership. So one of the actions we're taking, we're developing in our action plan, is for us to do a piece of work to map out what we're currently doing at all those levels to engage the third sector, and identify where the gaps are and look at how we can fill those gaps at the different levels within the partnership. But there's absolute full commitment from the third sector itself, but also from the IJB. It's something that we have talked about before around the IJB table, about the need for us to make sure that our partners in the third sector and the independent sector feel like true partners in the IJB and not just add-ons to the IJB. So it's just, again, further work as the partnership's evolving.
Thank you. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Julie, there's a common thread throughout the whole report, in my opinion, and it's really highlighted. Page 28, lack of clear leadership and support for integration. And again, on page 30, under 1.2, there's a lack of trust and understanding of each other's working practices and business pressures between the partners. And then I turn to page 41, and again under 3.1, lack of recognition and support for the Chief Officer's role in providing leadership. So, there's a thread, a common thread in terms of the leadership that is required in the organisation and the lack of trust, if you like. And then on page 34, it's the integration authority does not analyse and evaluate the effectiveness of the strategic planning and commissioning arrangements. And there is a lack of support for statutory partners. And then on the exemplary column there, it refers to as a consequence, sustainable and high quality services and supports are in place that better meet the local needs. And I'm just reading from our press article in last month, 2105, in the Standard, and the highlights there are let down by a lack of carers. And only yesterday I read a report, a national report, in one of the papers that referred to that there really isn't enough money or financial resources being put into health and social care from central government, that's both UK and Scottish government. And my first question is, we're reading this report in Audit and Risk from Audit Scotland. In your opinion, self-assessment, where would you put it in terms of 1 to 10? With the lack of trust, the lack of support, leadership and so forth, so that we can get an idea of just where we're at in this report, because we're 3 years into IJB and we've discussed this. And also, when we look at the needs of the people, and Tommy just referred to it, you know, we have in the west of the region, we have insufficient bed resources, residential care packages that are available to people to get discharged from hospital. We've got a plethora of examples, and it's really, when can we get a solution, or when can we expect to get a solution to the many problems facing health and social care?
Thanks for that, Willie. Right, there's quite a lot in there, Julie, obviously, as you'll have come accustomed to, but bear in mind this is on the back of a national audit, so not everything's going to apply to Dumfries and Galloway, and I think, I mean, my view would be we move from a position where trust could be better to a position where trust is established. You know, and that's, we've got to be always aiming towards improvement, so I'm not sure if Julie's quite happy to frame it in a 1 to 10 situation, because we want to reduce such a complex issue to such a simple sort of metric. But I mean, Julie, I don't know if you want to
suppose
answer that.
I think you're right, Chair. I wouldn't want to give a number in the overall assessment. What I would want to say, though, is that as the Chief Officer of the IJB, I absolutely do feel supported from the leadership that I receive, both from the IJB members themselves, but also from in my role as Chief Officer of the Health and Social Care Partnership, I am accountable to the Chief Executives of the two parties, so the Health Board and the Local Authority. And I think in Dumfries and Galloway, actually, we are seen as a partnership that is absolutely committed to progressing the principles of integration, and we have made some significant steps forward. That said, I mean, you'll see in page 22, paragraph 3.12, Councillor Scobie, we've summarised how we've scored ourselves. So you'll see that the majority of the way the scores sit within the established or the partly established. So I think what we've done is we've submitted that as our self-assessment, which I think shows that we have got nothing where we're saying we're not yet established or we're ineffective, but we're recognising that there's more work to do. And I think that is us being very clear. We've been very clear about that, and I think we're being realistic in saying that there's still further work to do in relation to a number of these indicators. I think the specific questions that you raise around the resources and the challenges that we face, we've talked before about the significant challenges that we have around the increase in demand for health and social care that comes from the change in demography of our population. But at the same time, we have significant challenges in terms of our workforce and our workforce sustainability in terms of recruitment. I'm pleased to say that we have now established a workforce sustainability programme board, which has got joint leadership across the Health Board, the Council and the Health and Social Care Partnership, looking at what can we do differently to try and make working within health and social care in Dumfries and Galloway a really attractive option for people. We absolutely recognise that our solutions to all the challenges that you've highlighted is about us being able to recruit to some really key posts within health and social care. So that is a programme board that's been established, I said, under joint leadership across the partnership to look at innovative ways of us tackling that really significant recruitment challenge that we have across health and social care.
Okay, we now have Councillor Ian Carruthers.
Actually, I think maybe my main questions were answered, but I suppose I've got a very generic one. So I think it's quite an honest actual evaluation. It's a self-assessment, obviously, and I think it's very much, it is aimed at the whole of Scotland. You've already touched on that, Chairman. So, see as we go forward, so that I just wonder how will we actually compare in Dumfries and Galloway to the other IGBs across Scotland? What does that look like, and when will we see that coming back? Because I've said this before, I do think we're one of the higher performing ones, if not the highest. So with social care and health, when it comes to that, when I hear certainly other members of IGBs, MSPs, so on and so forth, talk about integrated joint boards. So I do think we've done our own self-assessment. We need to fully understand, suppose sitting here with my social work hat on, how will that come to fruition as time goes on?
Okay, there's a couple of things there, Councillor Carruthers. One of the things that we've shared our self-assessment with Scottish Government, so all partnerships have, and we as a group of chief officers across Scotland have agreed that those self-assessments be shared. For a number of reasons, it's about us learning from partnerships that may have scored themselves as being exemplary in a particular area, and for us to find out what they've done and how we can learn from that. That would be the kind of pulling together all of the self-assessments is something that Scottish Government are likely to do and provide feedback to chief officers. And once I receive that, I'm more than happy to share that in terms of where we sit across. And I think it will be really interesting to see just where other partnerships how they have evaluated their progress and to understand where we sit. I think certainly in terms of all of the indicators that were measured against, and you'll be familiar, there's a number of performance indicators, and we bring performance reports to the IGB on a regular basis. Certainly our IGB is seen as one that is delivering against those performance indicators. The majority of those, we know we have got challenges in some areas that have been highlighted by fellow councillors in terms of the likes of delayed discharges, etc. But we are making good progress, but I'm happy to share that sort of evaluation of what's happening across the rest of Scotland as soon as I receive it, but I haven't received it yet.
Yeah, no, well, just to say that I think we'd welcome to see that progress coming back here. So you wanted to come back again, Councillor Carruthers? I suppose that's one of the things we've got to say. I mean, it'd be good to see that information coming back. But I do think, even taking it as an example, community engagement, I think we've scored so low in regards to that. So I think it's been very honest, if not a wee bit critical when it comes to, because in the last year we've seen a major change in how we engage with the wider communities across Dumfries and Galloway. So it will be good to see and have an understanding how honest the other IGBs have been as well. Thank you. Councillor Sloan.
Thanks, Chair. Very briefly. It would be very easy to think that when we criticise leadership, that we're sitting here talking about the management of the IGB. When I talk about it, I'm very much talking about the political leadership. I think there's been a lack of it, and I think that has to improve.
Comments noted. So with that then, sorry, Councillor McGregor.
Sorry, there's always one, isn't there? Just a very brief question. It's going back to the set-aside funding, which I know is sort of under national debate at the moment as well. And I'm heartened that Dumfries and Galloway has it integrated already. I think we're one of only one other authority that does. I suppose it's just seeking reassurance that the money that is set aside is being used to shift from acute services into sort of community-based care. And I think there's still very much a perception out there that whilst it's technically embedded within the IJBs, that the NHS are still very much holding on to that for acute services, and that it's not being utilised for the purpose that it was absolutely originally set out to do, which the legislation states as well. But as I say, I'm heartened it's integrated, but is it actually going to where it needs to be going?
So if I go back to what the set-aside budget actually is, it's not a budget that was intended to come from health to social care. It's a budget that is it's a part of the funding that health boards have for the delivery of services within the hospital setting. And that funding has been set aside for IJBs because they commission part of hospital services in other parts of the country. Here we commission all of hospital services. So what I was saying earlier, Councillor McGregor, about us having then that transparency means that the IJB can see how much money we are spending in institutional settings and in community settings, so that we can have those conversations around how do we shift the balance of care. So when we last looked at it, which was, I would say probably it would be 6 months ago now, the figures I'm going to give you, but broadly speaking, in terms of the money that we spend in institutional settings, we would look around 49.8% of our budget and 50.2% of our budget being spent on sort of community-based services, which shows that our balance of care is shifting to the community-based services, but the conversations we need to have at IJB are around how do we shift that percentage still further to more of the resource being spent on community-based services. The challenge that we've got in doing that is, when I talked about that demand increasing, we're seeing the demand increasing on the use of acute services year on year at the same time as community services. So we're seeing our demand in A&E increasing by, and our admissions increasing by 3% a year. We're seeing our demand for diagnostic tests like labs and x-rays increasing by 10% a year. So when you're seeing that demand increasing, the challenge of taking resources out of that into community-based services is really significant, and that is the work of the IJB. How do we shift the way in which people use and access health and social care services to a much more community-based model? So it's not straightforward, but what we've got in Dumfries and Galloway is we don't have the complications about who owns the budget and who can make those decisions, because all of it's delegated to the IJB for the IJB to take those commissioning decisions.
Thank you. Good question. Okay, so with that then, are we happy to go to recommendations to note, and we've certainly discussed the draft self-assessment at Appendix 1. Okay, thank you. So item 6 then is the day service review progress update, and I think it's Linda Owen we've got here to answer questions on this. Is there anything you'd like to add to the report, Linda?
Thank you, Chair. It's just to say that this is an update report. This is just a progress update as requested by the committee. So.
Members, any questions? I'll take Councillor Scobie first, followed by Councillor Juncker-Others.
Yeah, Chair, and there is reference to under 3.6 and 3.7, and it's both in Stranraer and Dumfries, but in particular to Stranraer. And I've asked the questions. Some of the people who use the daycare and have moved into the new Stranraer skills stations, they had concerns over, property that they believed belonged to them when they used the CIC. And there seems to be dubiety around that. Is there any way we can get that sorted out? I've had a reply, but it still didn't satisfy the users of the centres.
I think with that particular issue, I'll let Linda answer that, obviously, but this is about the day service review itself, but clearly that's of importance. So.
Councillor Scobie, a further update has come from CIC that they were working with Skills Station to identify what they no longer require at Thornycroft, and they are liaising directly with Stranraer Skills Station to facilitate that.
Councillor Juncker-Others?
Would you say, pleased to see this report here. It's good that we still see this capture this level of evidence, or what's going on predominantly through the health and social care partnership. I think it is important that this focuses on the service users, ultimately, their health, their care, how they integrate, keeping that care and day centres in the community, looking at the outcomes and outputs in particular, what's best for the service user. So, it's a noting report. I see this elsewhere, obviously, but delighted to see it here anyways.
I would comment on 3.12, which is, I suppose, what will happen when this concludes. And I think it may be the case where, I don't know if you want to add to this, Lillian, but there's something will come back to us in terms of full council being able to maybe look at options as a result of this. So whatever happens with this, there's certainly embedded in what we've agreed previously, that there's a method that the council can at least have a consultative view on potential options. So I don't know if you want to embellish that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that that is the process when the full review and option appraisals are available, then I will take those to full council, and then elected members will have an opportunity to have an agreed way forward, which I will then present to the IGB, who will make the ultimate decision with regards to the services. That is correct.
Thanks, Lillian. Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. I hope that this is no a mechanism simply to do away with day centres. There's always been a fear among elected members that there's been a progression away from supporting day centres in communities. And I personally feel that it serves a particularly good purpose and provides a mechanism for folk to engage. The question I would ask, and it's not for today obviously because we don't deal with local issues, but disappointed that Kirkconnell has been removed from these day centres before this process has taken place, with a reassurance in the papers here that they'll be supported for the next 3 years, the ones that remain. So I'd be keen to see what's being done to support that local community. There is a recognition it's an area of deprivation. We have building healthy communities there, but what active role they play in supporting the members that used to use what was a day centre in Kirkconnell is no longer there. So I know that's not for today because the officer will have that information in front of her, but I would like an update on what's being done. And I do air my concerns that it's a shame that some removal of services was conducted before the overall process has been concluded.
Well, as you say, it's maybe not for today, but I mean, while you're here, Linda, is there something you'd maybe be able to add to that, or is it something you need to pick up offline after the meeting, for example?
I think I can make a sort of general statement that the day services review document was consulted on and agreed by all the partners, and I think in that particular day centre they decided that they wanted to close. We didn't ask them to close, it was a recommendation, and they decided to speed that process up and go ahead with it. I think in terms of the wider day centres, the fact that we are engaging with them and going through this process, to me, shows that the value that they bring to the communities. We know that we've got about 1,100 people use our day centres alone, and they're providing just short of 60,000 meals a year. So they're a phenomenal asset to the community, which is why we've spent the time and the energy and the effort to engage with them. In no way is this a way to do away with the day centres, Councillor Dempster.
Thanks for that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maitland.
Thanks very much. I feel in some ways quite heartened that we're really beginning to focus on the people who actually are needing these services. It's adults and those with dementia. That's who we're looking at as far as their needs are concerned with respect to day services. When this comes through to elected members, I, for one, and I can say this, I think probably quite from the point of view of standing well back from this particular problem, I think that people will want to know the balance between what do our adults actually need, how we're going to provide, leading to what services, who's going to provide it, and how we're going to commission and procure. I think that's probably part and parcel of what may come in terms of options. I don't know. But members will want to know also about, arguably, the impact upon our community benefit and cohesion through the use of volunteers. I think that's also part and parcel of what you bring to us. And I think that should definitely be integral to the options that are said. You need to include that. I think Councillor Dempster really has probably actually said it in terms of what is actually happening on the ground in his ward. But at the same time, we haven't got enough money to support the things that we have supported in the past in the same way as we have supported them. We've got to concentrate on need. And so I hope that what comes will be completely clear in terms of options, and so that members understand. They might not like the decisions that they're being asked to endorse or comment on, but they'll still, the facts will be there. That's what we need.
Thank you, Councillor Maitland. So, and on that, in terms of the scope of the review and what the content of the options might be, is that something that would likely be included anyway in terms of what Councillor Maitland's raised there?
Certainly, Chair and Councillor Maitland, I think we've been trying to take a co-productive approach so that we have a limited number of options, because I think, as you would understand, with 9 different day centres, 9 different viewpoints, 1,100 members, there could be quite a significant number of options. What we're trying to do is get to the point where we can either get agreement or a range of options. So yes, we will be bringing that. We'll also be bringing information on the people that we have engaged with. We've also done work with the Crichton Institute to try and understand what people want for their care in the future, and linking that in as well, so that we're looking at the short term as well as the longer term. And we know that a lot of the day centres wouldn't survive without volunteers. Many have volunteer drivers, volunteer support workers, etc. So they are, I don't have that information directly to hand, but we can make sure that that is included in whatever we bring back, because there were, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there are a number of recommendations in the day services review. So the paper that will come back will address each recommendation in turn, what we have done, and whether we have been fully able to implement it or partially implemented it or not implemented it, and the reasons why. So each one, so this will become quite a sheaf of paper when it comes back, but it will have all that information in.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. If there's no further, I beg your pardon, Councillor Dougie Campbell, and then Councillor Ian Carruthers.
Thanks, Chair. I think Councillor Maitland touched on the question I was going to ask, and it was around paragraph 3.10 in reference to there not being unanimous agreement between day centres about who the day centres support. I'm guessing that's about adults that get care, and you mentioned that figure of 1,100 members. I'm just wondering, what are the implications for adults who would benefit from care if that this isn't resolved, or can it not be resolved? Because it does make reference to the day centre management boards having the sort of final say on who the members are.
In terms of the current day centres are only for people who are aged over 60 and above. So through the conversations that we have been having, we've been having more of a conversation about needs-based services, and that actually you may be in your 50s and have the same long-term condition as someone in their 60s and may benefit from the services that a day centre provides. Some of the day centres were nervous because they felt that might affect their constitution, because they were a day centre for older people only. So that's where the contention has been. But I think we have now resolved that issue. We've had a meeting since this report was submitted. So I think we are saying that day centres will be for any adult who would benefit from the day centre services. The management board are retaining an element of discretion, because our day centres are not registered care providers. So if someone requires a level of care, even if that is simply as toileting, they cannot attend a day centre without a care package being in place to support them. So that's why there's an element of discretion, because some people may come along and be inappropriate referrals just through lack of not understanding. So we're looking at slightly different models across the patch, where there are some areas where we have got home carers who attend the day centre, which allows people who have got personal care needs to go. In other areas we don't have that, because we have daycare that covers provides a registered service. So that's why there's an element of discretion, because they are also all voluntary organisations. Whilst we commission them, just now we fund something between 40 and 50% of their costs. So they are fully independent organisations that we make a contribution to. So therefore we can't entirely stipulate that they have to take absolutely everybody. But the idea is to try and make it more inclusive and more needs-based.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Carruthers.
Just a quick one, just because I thought we've seen this stuff at the Clinical and Care Governance as well, Committee of the Integrated Joint Board. My understanding, it's probably got to be this summer it would be resolved, but on the back of what's been said today, if this is through a consultative process going to the full council, I don't see it on next week's full council papers. That means the next one, September. I think after that means that before the Integrated Joint Board can do anything, it's probably got to be near November. Would that be the case? So I thought it was hopefully going to be getting resolved this summer.
Councillor Crothers, it would only be when the full review is concluded. This is the update on the current process, so it would not be ready for full council. And at this moment in time, we have no timeline for the conclusion of the review, given the ongoing discussions and co-production.
Councillor Karen Carruthers.
Thanks, Chair. I just really want to say I've had some good feedback actually from day centres just saying that they've enjoyed this process. Okay, it's been contentious at times and they've had some difficult conversations, but it's given them the opportunity to demonstrate what they are providing. And the other thing is I think it's really heartening to hear that it's an ageing service. That's what we should be looking at the end of the day. So it should be a need. So, I mean, I think it's positive.
I mean, just on the timeline question, is there a sort of expected time for sort of conclusion of this exercise?
It depends. We are still co-producing with the day centres on their financial options. We have a meeting with them in July. Our hope is that we will be in a position by the end of that meeting that we will have options or otherwise. However, because of the nature of co-production, it may not go to plan. If that does go to plan, we are looking to try and have a timeline of around September for this being concluded, because there is recommissioning work for the day care side of things that needs to be done. But the aim is to try and have this completed before Christmas. That's the timeline that we're working towards.
Thank you very much. I've got no further questions listed. Are we happy then, having discussed this, to note the progress towards the IGB direction issued on 29th of November to implement the actions of the Day Services Review? Okay, thank you. The next item for noting is the Public Protection Committee minutes. Are we happy to note those? Noted, thank you. And I have no further business. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks very much.